All right. Hi, everybody. I'm Ryan Albury, and I'm here today to interview Cenk Matalan, registered clinical counselor on the topic of men's work. Hello, Cenk.
Hi.
Uh, Cenk has his master's degree in counseling, and for the last few years has been working in an addiction treatment center, in addition to developing his own brand and name as a psychotherapist specializing in trauma, shadow work, and as a pivotal pillar in supporting men's work in one-on-one and group settings. Cenk and I met through a workshop through his organization Brave Men that I attended, and subsequently we kept in touch and began to sit in Men's Circle together. Cenk, how did you get started on this path?
This was actually I've always been interested in spirituality, meditation, and psychotherapy. Even as a teenager, I had the sense that so much of our suffering is actually, in a sense, self-inflicted because of the things that we carry and we're not aware of, or we don't know how to deal with. So there was a natural curiosity for me, and I knew, again, as a teenager, I wanted to go into this field, study psychotherapy, psychology. I did an undergrad, and then I followed that up with a master's degree, and since then I've been practicing, and I've been working on myself with these methodologies as well for more than 15 years now, and it's been benefiting my life tremendously.
So that 15 years, it sounds like as we're doing right now, sitting around the fire, you've been in the fire.
Exactly, the fire of transformation, and it's a hot place to be in, and right, not easy. And as men too, I find we don't really grow up with a lot of role models about this stuff, the maturity, the wisdom, the healthy living, how to be a man who is in touch with their emotions and heart and guts and the whole thing. So how can I be empowered as a man, becoming more and more mature, who can be strong and soft at the same time? And I find really our culture doesn't educate us in this. In fact, if anything, we are being educated in the complete opposite of that. I've been a seeker for a while, and I've been finding actually what I've been looking for. But of course, to live that is a whole other thing, and that journey seems really continuous. But the more I go into it, the more beautiful it gets, and it's really fiery.
Yeah, it's easy to obtain the information, and then the integration is a whole other cup of tea, isn't it?
Yeah.
So we spoke about. I mentioned the word shadow work earlier. I'm wondering if you're willing to go into what does shadow mean to you for our listeners here today?
Yeah, I mean, the way I got into shadow work was after meditation and doing positive thinking and all these other things that I found at one point, I was struggling with depression and anxiety and some addiction on the side, the whole thing, and it wasn't looking good. And I understood at one point that the work I do on myself had to go a lot deeper into trauma, into shadow. And the way I would describe shadow is the place in us that we don't want to look at, that like a storehouse of everything we're running away from, knowingly or unknowingly. Some of it is unconscious. And everything we are denying within ourselves, everything we're pushing away. And we might talk about this a little later, but in our shadow, there's also an incredibly beautiful aspects of ourselves.
So something that I would like to bring to the term shadow is repression. I mean, for me, I've lived with repressed anger. I never wanted to be like a certain person in my life, so I repressed it. I repressed all aspects of me that were similar to that, and to the point where I believed that I wasn't that.
Exactly. I find something that happens to a lot of us men is if we grow up around unhealthy male power, that maybe people around us, males around us, have abused their power, their healthy power was not available to them, or they misused their power, their anger, turned that into aggression. What we find is, and I had this experience as well, I remember actually as a teenager seeing other boys so aggressive. At one point, almost with a lot of awareness, deciding to never be like them. But what happened there, because I didn't know what I was doing, I ended up repressing my power in its entirety. So what happened was I also got disconnected from my healthy power, from my healthy anger, and that doesn't help us, because in there we also have our healthy capacity to say no, to say I don't want that, or please don't treat me like this because it hurts. But I find more and more this is an experience of a lot of men.
Two things that you said there I want to just hook into later on, so I'm just going to repeat them, was the healthy power piece, and I hope later on we can talk about what that looks like, what that means, and how to get there. And the other one's escaping me right now, but I'm sure it'll come back, so we'll just move on.
Yeah.
The piece that I'm curious now is, like, we talk about, oh, there it is. It's the piece around healthy anger. What's the opposite of healthy anger? Like, how would you call that?
Exactly. The opposite of healthy anger could be passive aggression.
I meant more so like, what would it be termed as? I think you've called it toxic anger, or
it could be
like
toxic
shame and things like that.
Yeah. So I like to I like to use the word toxic when we talk about shame, but the anger piece is when we repress our anger, or when we're using it in ways that is unconscious, we might really hurt people, because then our power could become aggression, sarcasm, passive aggression, little jabs, and it can also turn into wanting to manipulate and control people, with or without knowing. We all do these things every now and then. So to shine a light to our own anger and how we use it, and also how we misuse it, is an extremely beneficial undertaking, and not only for men, but for everybody.
Definitely. So we've talked about what the shadow is, and I'm sure we could talk about that for a long time. Where I'm curious about your approach is on how I want to go into emotions, but I want to first understand fully what even is an emotion. Like, how does it work? How does it affect the body? How does it affect our relationships?
Yeah, what I have found is, at the emotional level, again, from our cultural conditioning messages we hear, say a little boy, even in the playground, they could be shamed if they cry. So they could be called a wimp, a pussy, and so they could start repressing their softer aspects, their humanity, the softer kind aspects of their humanity, their vulnerability, and the fact that they're a human being, that they also could get hurt.
And what's the outcome of that?
Yeah, so when we repress these things in ourselves, then really what happens is we start living behind a mask that we call our male conditioning, our gender conditioning, and that mask really is an armoring around the heart. And over time it gets more and more rigid. We feel isolated. We feel like the lone wolf. We got to do everything alone. And it leads us to addiction, because there's tremendous suffering in that. And it could also, shame plays in that. Right. What do you mean I'm going to go to therapy? Right? We might even get extremely defensive with people. We might say, no, I don't need this. No, I don't need that. No. So we could really hide behind that mask that actually becomes a prison for us. And in fact, so in my work on myself, if I can summarize what I've been doing, is I've been, I think, liberating myself from this prison of what my culture tells me, what kind of man I should be. Because it really is extremely heavy expectations that cuts us off from our humanity.
Right.
With all the shoulds, all the ways that we have to look, we have to talk, we have to be, we have to feel. And in that, certain emotions are allowed to us, and certain emotions are not. And what I have found is the freedom from that is getting in touch with all our emotions. And all our emotions are relational realities. In a relationship, if we're not in touch with all our emotions, that relationship cannot be healthy. Because as we'll be exploring, our emotions are messengers to us, and they tell us, they give us messages about what's happening inside and outside. Because emotion is more than feeling. We might feel something, but once we recognize what that emotion is, then suddenly we can say that. We can say a friend to a friend, hey, I feel angry about the fact that you didn't show up to our coffee date yesterday, and you didn't even let me know that you were not going to show up. And in that anger, also anger is a beautiful and vulnerable emotion, I wouldn't be angry if I didn't care. Because we care how we are being treated, because we care about the quality and the depth of the connection we have with other people, that healthy anger will be there for me to bring up a conversation with a friend, for example. So that the way we are treating each other is truly caring and healthy and respectful.
Yeah, when you talk about the I can't remember the word you used exactly, but I'll use the word cages or prison maybe used. Mm-hmm. But when we talk about the masks and the suppression and the anger and the caring, that really reminds me of what I spoke of earlier around that suppression piece of like suppressing that anger and putting myself in that cage and putting that mask on of the jovial Joker mask, and how it stripped me of vulnerability, which like essentially stripped me of who I even was and what was really going on for me, and then it stripped me of connection.
Exactly, because there's a self-betrayal in that, isn't it? Because we're not being authentic. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, beautiful. Thanks for sharing that. It really hit home for me. So when we talk about emotions, what are the base emotions that you work with?
So we can see some primary emotions that are really at the core of our being. One is anger, the other one is shame, and the other one is fear, and the fourth one we can say sadness and grief. All extremely important emotions. Like they're at the core of our being.
Right. And when you mentioned meditation earlier, I know that you've practiced some Vipassana, actually extensive amounts of Vipassana, and as have I. And I wonder if you'll speak to, for a moment, the connection between body sensations, thoughts, and emotions, the somatic piece.
Yeah, so if someone is a practitioner of meditation, what meditation gives us is a capacity to stand a little apart from our experience. If that's a healthy distance, then we can be more skillfully aware of what we are feeling instead of, so let's say, getting lost in it or getting fused with a state. Either it's a thought or a feeling or an emotion. If we can just be mindful of it, that means healthy separation without disconnecting. That gives us some space within which to cultivate a relationship with the emotion. It's very, it's a superpower, actually.
Yeah. I mean, the way that you just expressed that and described that was beautiful for me to connect a bunch of dots for myself. Let's go into those four emotions that you mentioned and just take a look at each one, and perhaps if you feel called to it, talk to the healthy and the unhealthy expressions of each, and perhaps the outcomes from the unhealthy expressions. Maybe we'll start with anger, since we've already touched on that one a few times.
Exactly. So what I find is that anger is connected with our healthy boundaries. Healthy boundaries means, say, in a relationship, how we would like to be treated respectfully, with dignity, self-worth.
So what would an example of a healthy boundary be between us?
A healthy boundary could be, let's say I lied to you, or I manipulated a truth, I hid something from you. And somewhere within you, when you are connected with all your emotions and also your intuition, energetically, you might actually feel that maybe I'm hiding something. So in the relationship, something will feel a little out of tune for you, a little out of place. Or maybe you will see it when I'm saying something to you, even in my body language, that maybe I'm just not revealing the whole truth. So if we're both going for a healthy friendship, well, that could become a problem. Imagine I'm doing that all the time.
Right.
So that will impact how much you can trust me. And let's say you bring that up with me. You say, hey, dude, like yesterday when you said this, I had this sense that maybe there's more. Did you tell me the entire truth? Or if you didn't, why not? Let's have a conversation about that. So, and you could challenge me, you could confront me,
Right.
and you cannot do that if you're not in touch with your healthy anger.
Right. Okay.
You're actually calling me forward.
Right. And so if I wasn't in touch with my healthy anger, what might I do if I sensed or knew that you were manipulating me in that way?
Aha, maybe you'll just take it.
Oh.
And then you'll be enabling me to treat you in a way that is undermining how much you can trust me.
Right, so we'd start creating a dynamic of relationship style.
Yes, and we can say that could be at the beginning of an unhealthy relational dynamic.
Okay. What else might I do if I was not expressing that which I was sensing in the anger world?
Say, I mean, in a romantic relationship, let's say we are swallowing what we would rather say to the other person, or confront, or say, put someone on the spot, for example, right? If we are not bringing up anything because of our fear of conflict or shame, or maybe I'm afraid that my partner is going to leave me if I say something, then we are really opening ourselves up for all kinds of unhealthy habits and patterns that we are in fact enabling in the other.
Right.
That could go all the way to emotional abuse or all kinds of abuse. And this is how codependent relationships start.
Right. And so earlier when we were speaking of anger, you mentioned healthy expression of anger, which you spoke to the boundaries piece, and then you spoke of, on the unhealthy side of anger, I think there were 3 or 4 expressions that you mentioned of unhealthy anger. There was like suppression, aggression.
Yeah, aggression, violence, of course,
Right.
unhealthy, name calling, all that is
Right.
unhealthy, shaming, blaming the other person.
Oh yeah, right. And then you mentioned passive aggression.
And then passive aggression, and sometimes passive aggression is not easy for us to be aware of. But what happens is little jabs, right? And for example, sarcasm, the eye rolling, these little jabs really destroy the healthy container, the healthy integrity of the space we create together. So important.
So healthy anger, when I'm in a place of healthy anger, you spoke about boundaries. Is there anything else that healthy anger might bring to the relationship?
Healthy anger, because anger is a fiery energy, healthy anger brings light. Yes, there is anger in it. Maybe it will be a little messy, especially in the beginning of one's expression of healthy anger. Maybe the first 10 seconds or whatever, I might still name call my friend or something. But then the thing is, the goal is to continue, because if I am angry about something, and if my anger is coming from a deep connected place in me, vulnerable place, that means I care. If I didn't care, I simply wouldn't be bothered. Because we care, anger is such a beautiful thing. We can say anger is the guardian of our healthy boundaries. And relationally, anger is also the guardian of depth and the health of the relationship itself.
And it sounds like it's transformative energy.
Oh, it's completely transformative. You know, in some Buddhist traditions, the Vajrayana tradition, healthy anger, heart anger, anger compassionately anger, it's actually said to be the diamond that has the power to cut through all kinds of bullshit. And in this way, I'm using the word bullshit as a way of relationally bringing light and, let's call, enlightening a pattern that is maybe holding our love away from each other. So when there's healthy conflict, healthy challenge, confrontation, the passionate energy of anger is really like a torch, illuminating something that we both need to see, so that we can be a little more loving with each other and caring.
Right. From my work, I've learned about the concept of cover emotions, and anger is my go-to cover emotion.
Exactly. In the form
After
of,
the suppression stopped.
yes, in the form of aggression, like we can,
Totally. Yeah.
We
So
can-
do you want to describe what a cover emotion might be and why? Because anger is, I would judge it for males of the primary one, or one of the top ones anyway.
Exactly. So I think when that happens, when we get reactive or overly defensive or something like this, let's say in different ways aggressive and all this, we are actually not in touch with our vulnerability.
Right.
So that's the bridge between unhealthy anger and healthy anger. if I can then get in touch with what's really bothering me, the emotional part of it, the wounding, the hurt, then we can shift gears, and then our anger is not only fire, but it's also heart. It's both at the same time. And yeah, we can use aggression as a defense against vulnerability. And in those moments, we can say anger actually is a secondary emotion. The first emotion might be maybe there's some fear, maybe there's some shame, or maybe there's some sadness, and shame maybe on top of that. And I'm covering it all up with aggression,
Right.
which is actually a misuse of the energy of healthy anger.
Right, okay. So this is getting exciting for me because I'm starting to see that each of these emotions is going to have a polarized, not maybe polarized, I'll just continue.
The healthy and unhealthy.
They're each going to have one that's almost like the gift that they're going to bring to the relationship.
Exactly.
To actually make them better.
Exactly. And the other side of the gift is the shadow of that emotion.
Right. So back to shadow. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. So as we work through these, we talked about anger as a cover emotion. We started there, and some of the subsequent emotions were shame, fear, grief, and sadness. Do you want to speak to another one of those now that we're starting to go down in that layer cake of emotion?
Yes. So the second one on our list is shame. Shame is unfortunately for a lot of us, not only men, shame is lodged into our shadow. But here's the thing, there's toxic shame, very difficult to feel and work with because it mutates very quickly to other states. Like what we mentioned, it can mutate into shutting down suddenly. It can mutate into feeling numb or depressed or wanting to isolate right away, wanting to leave right away. And it can also mutate into this aggression as a mask of anger.
Right.
But once we work with shame, there's also a healthy shame. Healthy shame allows us to apologize from our heart when we hurt someone. So it's extremely relational because it's connected with our conscience, our inner wisdom that says, okay, maybe yesterday when you were talking to your girlfriend, best friend, family member, maybe you were a little too edgy, maybe you said something that might really wound them, that might have hurt them. And healthy shame becomes this subtle, loving voice that reminds us that maybe there's something we need to address here.
Right. So that healthy shame is like a connective, it's almost like I'm trying to explore this because this is a place that I've worked. It's like a connective, like ownership of what happened.
Exactly.
Right, okay.
It's full on accountability.
Right, there you go.
With humility, because healthy shame is also our humility.
Right. Humility. Okay, so these start to get like extremely beautiful when we start to look at practicing these emotions. Okay.
And then the toxic shame is connected with our inner critic.
Right.
Let's say in a relational, let's go with the example we mentioned earlier. Say, I know that I'm late to meeting up with you, but I didn't show up for our connection. I didn't let you know, and I stood you up, right?
Yeah.
So that hurts you. That makes you lose trust towards me because I could have let you know and I didn't. Simple example. And when I feel that this is happening for me, that I actually let you down, suddenly instead of shifting into healthy shame, what might happen is my inner critic will start torturing me. Will start saying, you are a fuck up, you're a failure, look what kind of friend you are.
Right.
You're a terrible man, you treat your friend like this. You're not man enough, you're a failure, you're weak,
Right.
all this. The more I believe the inner critic, the more I go into toxic shame. And then I go into guilt. I start punishing myself. I start blaming myself. And unfortunately, the more I get lost in the dramatization of what I could have done and I didn't do, I get disconnected further away from my healthy shame.
Right.
Because accountability and self-blame and self-torture are two completely different things.
Right. So when you talk about the inner critic, it reminds me of some of the work that I've done with like internal family systems therapy and parts work around core beliefs. And so it sounds like each of these emotions might have an inner part that has a voice attached to it that might create a belief around those things that we might get sucked into it, where we lose our access to the healthy emotion.
Exactly, and those beliefs usually come from the times when we were a little boy,
Right.
and that we got shamed or punished for certain things. So we have internalized some messages,
Right, right.
and they show up now in our heads
Right.
as the inner critic.
Right. And I've seen you facilitate some in workshops and in men's groups and men's circles and things, and you actually go in and work with those parts, the inner critic, and work with these emotions, correct?
Exactly, and when someone stands up to their inner critic, which is really a bully that we carry within our own psyche because we have internalized this bully voice from the outside, it's extremely empowering to actually, in a role play, in a safe, respectful, compassionate environment with appropriate guidance, to actually say, you're shaming me, you're bullying me, to the inner critic. It's extremely empowering. And we get to see the inner critic for the slave driver, for the bully that it is. And then we can really feel in our core that we are not the inner critic.
Right.
That's very empowering.
Totally. I know we're on emotions here, and I'm just still curious about this inner critic, and I think it pertains to what you do. So I just want to segue for a sec, if it's okay, and talk about, like, is this inner critic out to get us? What is it trying to accomplish? And these other parts that have similar voices inside of us.
The inner critic is the reliving of an old pattern that we better look at and heal and grow out of. Having said that, the inner critic, just like our thinking, is part of our thinking process. The inner critic doesn't disappear. What happens is it actually starts to become a mosquito in a space that's continuously getting larger and larger and larger. It's still the same fucking mosquito, but now we don't feel like we are trapped with the mosquito in a tiny little room because we are becoming aware of the mosquito. And our internal space, emotional and mental space, is continuously expanding. And one day, that space could become infinite, but there is only still the one little annoying mosquito that we can tune out of, like really background noise or a bad radio station.
Right.
We just look at it and go, oh, it's the same old bullshit message you're giving me. We smile at it and we go, I don't believe you. And the moment we do that, we take back our dignity, our self-worth, our joy, our confidence that the inner critic steals from us when we believe it.
Right. And so other things, other parts inside of us along with inner critic might be inner little boy, inner saboteur.
Inner child.
Yeah.
And the inner critic is attacking the inner child, this wounded young place in us, which is usually the same age when we were shamed as a little boy.
Right.
That's how we internalized all this stuff.
Right, so we continue to do the same thing in our psyche that we experienced at a certain point in our development.
Exactly. Just like with trauma, when we are not healing the trauma in some ways with the way we live, we might continuously re-traumatize ourselves.
Right.
So there's a re-wounding happening.
Right, okay. Cool.
And so in this work, what we do is, as our adult self, authentic self, mature self, with our healthy power, we go in between the inner child and the inner critic, and we protect the child in us, the vulnerable place in us, and we say a big no to the inner critic, which is the bully.
Right. Beautiful. Okay, thanks for that segue. That was important for me to go there. So our third emotion that we've got here is after anger and shame is fear.
Yeah, fear. I mean, in our shadow, there are so many things that are really difficult to look at. And I think it's also important, as we're getting deeper here, to remember that this is core level work. Like, this is real deep stuff.
Right.
So self-compassion here.
I guess we forget because this is what we do.
Yeah. So totally.
Yeah. I forget.
I mean, going into this with a lot of patience.
Totally. Yeah.
And not taking it as another should.
Right.
that I should be doing all this deep work, otherwise I'm not man enough. No, it's not like that at all.
Right.
This is difficult stuff. Core level wounding, core level awakening, healing, growth.
Yeah.
And it's fucking difficult, right? It is. I mean, I know it is for my life. How about you? It's difficult.
I want to turn away every time.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Is this going to stop now?
I mean, yeah, I've been in this work as a client myself for over 8 years or something. And now, continuously, when my therapist invites me to a role play, there is still a bit of a shaking going on inside, you know? So it's not easy. So let's bring some patience in us, in this gentleness, humility, that this is core level stuff. And as a practice, this is a lifelong journey. Maybe at one point we don't need psychotherapy anymore, but because we've been skilled so much, but it's really a lifelong journey. It's a lifelong awareness and practice, just like anything else. And so before we go into shame, I just wanted to...
Into fear.
Yeah, into fear. I just wanted to add that into this mix. So
good one.
So fear, we can say fear is the dragon that we don't want to face. The dragon that is actually holding so much of our power, life energy, aliveness. Fear is like a really tight fist, really tight. There's so much in there. And when we bring more awareness and kind awareness, gentle, self-loving, compassionate awareness to this place in us, and usually a very young place in us, that is simply terrified, that is simply afraid. Whatever happened to us as a child, maybe trauma, neglect, fear of the unknown, fear of abandonment, fear of rejection. So we work with fear very gently and very slowly. We open to this really vulnerable place.
Right. It almost sounds like there's, with those parts that we were talking about earlier, and the wounded part of us that, maybe it's 5 or 6 years old, the inner child, it sounds like we have to build trust there so that fear can gently move. Yeah.
And the more we start living with healthier boundaries, the more we don't allow people to treat us disrespectfully, abuse us, the more this younger place starts to actually trust us.
Right.
And the younger place, its gifts, the gifts of the inner child is our sense of innocence, our sense of humanity, our deep humanity, sensitivity, and our childlike joy that we want to stay connected as we get older. We don't want to get disconnected from that. That's just one of the most beautiful aspects about being a human being, this open wonder and joy. And this place in us, as we deepen in this work, as we become better at handling relationships, as we keep toxicity away from us, so to speak, energetically, emotionally, the child in us starts to relax more. And then we can say then the child is opening its own deeper wounding more to us so that we can start digesting that.
When you said that childlike play, I just started laughing. I was like, I guess I must have worked with my fear a little bit, because I just felt that childlike. I was like, oh yeah, that thing, and it just started rolling in me, and it was beautiful. Like just hearing you say those words, like activated that piece in me.
Yeah.
Like that childlike joy and play. It was so nice.
So
it's there.
And I also work with a lot of unfinished sentences, so I'll just give you a few. Right now, I feel.
Yeah. Oh, for me?
Yeah. Right now, I feel.
Pleasant and playful.
The child in me is.
Oh, he's beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's beautiful.
Yeah.
I've met him a lot of times.
Yeah.
He's taught me a lot of lessons, that boy.
Yeah.
Cool. Is there anything that you wanted to touch on further with fear? I guess there's the healthy side of fear.
Healthy side of fear is that, to me, fear means, the way I work with it within me is, fear coming up in my system is such an amazing thing. Of course it's difficult. But what it means is a deeper expansion is wanting to happen. It's showing itself as contraction, and fear is a contracted energy. It's asking for my attention, gentle, compassionate attention, soft energy. It's asking for my heart to contact the fearfulness inside, because that something in me is ready to expand. And as fear expands, as we face our fears, let's say, fear of the unknown, the different fears, relational, fear of abandonment, fear of loneliness, all that. Say, within fear of loneliness, we find belonging to our own being. Within fear of rejection, we find self-acceptance. So, within fear of abandonment, we can find the part of us that never abandons us. The wisdom inside, the core of our being, the mature self that's always here,
right,
as an ally, as a resource, and as support. And yeah, fear wants our heart so that it can give its energy back to us, which is a lot of our own power.
right.
And so we feel more and more empowered the more we get in touch with our healthy anger, as well as the more we work with our fears.
Right. Beautiful. Can we skip over the last one, grief and sadness? Like, it's been
For the moment?
like forever.
Yeah. Grief is a big one too, right? Yeah.
Definitely. Let's do it.
Yeah. Grief, sadness, heartbreak, right? A lot of profound feelings of deep hurt. And grief is the emotion of loss. And when something changes in our lives, maybe some relationship comes to an end, or sometimes maybe we're moving from some place to another. Even when someone becomes a father, for example, even there's an identity there that's getting lost. Their identity that they were, say, a single man or whatever, even there's a loss there. So when we honor, say maybe we get into an accident and we lose a certain capacity of our body, loss is all around us. Loss is a part of life. And grief comes with loss. When loss happens outside in the world, in our lives, the internal registering of that is grief and sadness. And there's so much loss in our lives, right? Old age, death, losing people close to us, so much. The ending of a relationship. Even sometimes moving from a city to another, there's a loss. And we want to honor the fact that something is ending. Even if something more beautiful is starting, something is ending. And in our society, we don't grieve, and especially as men, we tend to have a lot of shame around it. For a man to be able to cry deeply, openly, without feeling like he needs to cover his face, we do a lot of work to get there as men.
I remember seeing a documentary about this men's work in prisons, and it's called The Work. And I remember a quote from that movie, and it was, "Cry like a man," and it was straighten up your back, put your shoulders back, chin down, tears rolling down your face.
Yeah.
In that powerful, sovereign position.
Exactly. And crying with our spine erect, so to speak, right? With our head held high, crying with no shame, with no toxic shame, what an incredible thing. And it makes us that much more human, I think. It connects us with our depths, with our humanity.
Right.
To me, an advanced practitioner of meditation, or a deep someone who's living life deeply, is someone who can cry openly and see that as very much, just like anything else, part of their manhood. Part of what makes them a mature man. And again, it's not easy.
Yeah, I'm like, it's not easy.
It's really not. Yeah.
Oh man. Yeah, when I invited, I had done a bunch of the anger work and the shame work and the fear work, and it's like, oh, you think you've done the fear work? It's like, okay, go into use that confidence that you've made from approaching the fear, and face the grief. And that was some of the hardest, most beautiful. It's like taking my speech away. It's some of the hardest, most beautiful work that I've ever experienced, and the results afterwards are just phenomenal.
Me too, and because in those moments I also feel, well, what what I'm being invited to is actually requiring everything that I have.
Yeah.
Everything that I have, we can say it actually brings forth the best in us, this kind of work. And as a man, and I see other men doing the same, the people I work with, there's a very natural courageousness in us, bravery. And actually, as men, we love a good challenge because we are warriors. And this is the warriorship of intimacy, of healthy relationship, of dignity, of life, of depth. And that dragon of fear, or the pain of shame, and grief, and all this, it's almost like our depths are calling. And once we answer that call, we show up for that. It's incredible because it also breaks the heart, because we're getting in touch with our deep pain that maybe our entire personality might have been based on how can I run away from this as soon as possible, with trying to please other people, with being the nice guy, with being the tough guy, like all the different masks are there. Once we start dissolving the armoring, there's a lot of beauty there, and there's also a broken heart. To me, a broken-hearted man, I've been experiencing this more and more deeply myself. It's fucking not easy, but to me, a broken-hearted man means a man that I can trust, because his heart is online, his power is online. It's an incredible thing. And not to please anybody, but just because we want to live life like this. It's not to score brownie points with women.
And all the other things that we can use our masks and size and privilege to try and accomplish, to try and fill these gaps that we are left with in our experience in life. When you were speaking earlier, I was having shivers run, about the power and the man you can trust. I was like, oh man, the shivers running through my body were just phenomenal, because I was like, yes.
Yeah.
Like, yes. Like, this is, I mean, this is going to lead into what we're going to talk about later, but like, why do this work? But like, that's a little, for me, it's like that feeling of like, yes. Like, exactly. I can do this, we can do this, we're doing this. Like, exactly. This is worth it. Every disgusting emotion that I don't want to be or look at or feel or show anybody has that beauty. Yeah.
And I know that you and I both, we want to inspire, encourage, and support other men into diving into themselves like this. And also because we want to see more men stepping up like this, right, in their lives.
Oh, most definitely.
Yeah. And just imagine how our culture, our society could get impacted by that.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we hear about the patriarchy and toxic masculinity, and I mean, go down the list of the things that are being spoken about in the realm of the male and the masculine right now, and it's important work for this planet.
Exactly. And if we do some work on our toxic shame, or all the shoulds, or the self-punishment tendencies and guilt, then this work becomes not another should, but a beautiful invitation to our own depths. And in that, then there is no rush, there is no ambition. So we are smooth sailing from that point on. It's just a beautiful journey of deepening, healing, growth, trauma resolution, shadow integration, and awakening. And it's so beautiful and it's so humbling. And we are opening not only to ourselves or to the people in our lives, we are also opening to life in its entirety. Our heart starts to really open and break open to embrace life as it is.
And embrace love as it is. I mean, I've been in this work like about 5 years, and I felt love 2 years ago. And I thought that I had, and I said that I do, and I said that I am, and then I felt it.
Totally, I understand.
And I had
exactly.
to get my ass kicked all over the goddamn room for years.
Exactly.
And it was every metaphorical, emotional, heart-based black eye was worth it. There were probably some real black eyes too.
You know what? When I was about 22 years old, I had my first real deep breakup that left me in depression for at least 6 months. And in the depths of that pain, I remember asking myself, I want to know what love is, and I'm going to make this the core of my life. I want to find what love is, real love. And almost every 6 months to every year, I look back today. It's been, how long has it been? I mean, the past 15 years that I've been doing this work on myself. Every 6 months to a year, I look back to the person I was 6 months ago, a year ago, and I go, wow, I didn't know what love was. Now I know a little more, just a little more. And I go, okay, well, I guess I can say that the work I'm doing on myself is beneficial because I'm shifting so much.
Yeah.
And my understanding of love keeps on shifting. And I hope that it never stops to shift.
Yeah, before this meeting here, I sat with a man that I had met in a men's circle, and he subsequently did some trainings and continued on with this work. And I shared with him, I said, I don't even know who you are anymore. I moved out of town, and him and I lost the frequency of connection. And I said to him, I was like, I don't even know who you are anymore. And he was startled. He thought I was coming at him a little bit, which I tend to do sometimes, but I was not. And I just started laying it on him, like my heart truth of how I saw him now, and how the growth that I've seen him go through was so inspiring for me. And then I realized I was projecting all over the place, and that I was like, wow, I've changed. Like I'm a different man. So thank you for saying that about your experience every 6 months to a year, because it reminds me that like this work does create results.
It really does. It really does, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. The hard work pays off, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And maybe another time we can talk for an hour about how much it pays off and just tell all our glory stories, and we're still struggling and get vulnerable a little bit. But maybe for now we should call that a good start, and maybe we'll speak again another time.
And I know from knowing you, and I'm also from knowing where I come from as well, we have become the role models that we wanted around us while we were growing up.
Thank you for that.
What do you think? Yeah, right?
Yeah. Well, I can feel it. It's shivering again. I'm like, holy shit, that's true, but it's scary. Because
there's such a huge lack in our society. As men, we don't have good role models. We really don't.
And neither did they.
And neither did they, yeah. And so let's do this work more and more deeply and become those role models and encourage and support other people.
Yeah, man.
And have lives that are really fulfilling, right? With a lot of inspiration, meaning, purpose, the whole thing.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Well, hey, Cenk, I really appreciate connecting with you today and you sharing your wisdom with me and all of the beautiful things we covered today. I think this is a really great thing we're doing here and that we do in our lives. So I want to honor you as a man I trust and look up to. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, and likewise. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okie doke.